Welcome to Module 3 of the Prep-It Instructional Presentations. This is part of a series of presentations on the use of the various features in the PrEP Implementation, Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation tool, or Prep-It. Prep-It is a decision-making and analysis tool with several interrelated modules used for target setting, costing, and commodities forecasting. This presentation is the third in a series of presentations on the features and functions of Prep-It. This module covers the first two steps of configuration in the tool. In the configuration section, we define the PrEP program. This allows the tool to generate program-specific results. As we move through the configuration section, we will go through the steps from top to bottom, starting with specifying the priority populations. In each section, we will click on the Next button to sequentially go through the steps of configuration. The first step is to specify who is receiving PrEP in our program. For these default populations, Prep-It has a default data on population size estimates, costs, and impact factors. To begin, review the default priority populations and delete any that are not included in the program by clicking on the delete symbol. For additional populations not on this list, you can click on the plus side and add up to 15 more priority populations and name them. Keep in mind that these added populations will not have default data, and you will need to input these data as you move through the tool. One thing to note is that you should not delete serodifferent couples to rename them, such as serodiscordant couples. The calculations for serodifferent couples in Prep-It are different than other populations, and the defaults should be used if you are providing PrEP to this population, even if your program calls them by a different name. Here is an example where a Prep-It user has specified 5 distinct groups for PrEP. 4 of these are from the list with default data: serodifferent couples, men who have sex with men, female sex workers, and people who inject drugs. The other default populations have been deleted using the delete symbol. Next, the user added a custom priority population and named them clients of sex workers. As this user moves through the tool, they will need to remember to include inputs for this population, where there are default data for the first 4 populations. If you are not setting targets for PrEP countrywide, you can also indicate what subnational areas are prioritized for PrEP target setting in the populations module. Use the click boxes to uncheck any areas that are not included in your target setting exercise for each priority population. When it comes to methods, there are 3 default methods: oral or pill PrEP, ring, and CAB PrEP. Delete any of these methods that are not being used, and you can add additional methods by clicking on the plus sign. For each remaining method, we need to include the unit of the commodity, like bottles of pills, the number of months of coverage per unit, such as 1 month per bottle, the commodity cost, including shipping and freight, but not service delivery, and the method effectiveness. If there are methods that are going to be rolling out during the target setting period, you can indicate the starting month when that method is expected to be introduced using the drop-down menus. If you make changes to the unit costs and then want to revert back to the defaults, you can always click on Reset to Defaults button that's in the upper right corner. Once the methods are specified, we click Next, and then the tool has to indicate what methods are available to each priority population using these checkboxes. This pattern will continue for other functions in Prep-It, where first we define a program feature and then we assign it to our populations. In this example, Prep-It automatically unselected MSM for the ring because the program knows that MSM is a default population and that the ring is not indicated for this population. However, the user in this case decided that the ring would not be appropriate for clients of sex workers and unselected the ring for this particular population. The next slide will show a demonstration of specifying the population and methods in PREPIT. So here we are on the Priority Populations tab, and you can see our default priority populations. What I'm going to do in this example is retain some of the priority populations. I'm retaining 0 different couples and keeping them in that number 1 spot to ensure that the tool recognizes that population appropriately. And I'm also going to keep the next 3. I'm going to delete these other 2. And then I'm going to add a custom population for my particular example, which I'll call Fisher Folk. And remember that when I've added a custom population, this means it will not have default data associated with it. And that's something I'm going to have to assign to it as I move through the tool. Next, looking below, we can see for our regions and districts, if I wanted to at this point, I could go through and indicate if PrEP was not going to be prioritized for specific subnational areas. In this example, I'm going to keep them for all the different populations. And then we'll hit next. And now we're at methods. So as mentioned, there are 3 default methods with default effectiveness and unit costs. This pop-up box will give you some information about how the costs were derived. In this example, I'm going to say that we have pill, that we're not offering ring for these particular targets, and that we also have CAB PrEP, but that CAB PrEP will not be available until March 2025. If you wanted to change some of these specifications, you could change the unit costs. You can also add additional methods, or you can delete methods as well. So now with our methods and populations specified, now we're going to assign those methods to each priority population. So in this example, we're going to allow pill and CAB PrEP for all of our priority populations. But if for some reason we did not want to make a certain type available, we would just unclick a box. When we hit next, then we go on to the next section, which is continuation, which we'll talk about in the next video. For information on these and other functions in PREPIT, please join the PREPIT community of practice. You can enter questions with the hashtag populations or methods so that others can learn from your question as well.